Hey, howdy yo, all you beautiful motherfuckers out there, and welcome back to the $2 Film Club, where it's me and Leo just talking about films yet again. And we got one film for this week. This is a movie I've been looking forward to for quite a while to talk about on the podcast, and that's Barbarian. Zach Cregger. I've heard, I think it's Krieger, but I'm sure someone will probably correct me in the near future. Is coming out with this new directorial feature slash writing. Weapons. I saw it. I'm not going to say anything because I feel like anything I say will give out my thoughts and opinions, but I'll save that for a different day. I love Barbarian, and I feel like I've talked nothing but highly good things about this film to you, Leo. And now you've watched it. How do you feel? I just got to know off the rip.
I mean, obviously, I thought it was good. I'm just like I was telling you before we jumped on here. I don't know how to process what I watched. Kind of like I know some of the things that I liked and disliked. It's just yeah, I've just been struggling to figure out what exactly I have to say about this.
It's not your typical film per se.
It's
Um,
got a typical what's the word I'm looking for? It's got like a typical premise, sort of. Like there's I recognize some of like the tropes, but it uses them in like completely different ways. And obviously the structure of the story is very unusual. And those were the things that I really liked about it.
Now, I want you to picture yourself because when I pulled up the Wikipedia, I said, "Holy fuck! I can't believe this came out in 22." You thought it
Ugh.
was later, but that's
No, I
neither
thought it
here
was
or there.
earlier.
Yeah, earlier or later, same fucking thing, bro. Anyway, my point being, imagine watching this film in the theater with one other person, not knowing what the film premise is even about, and not even watching the trailer.
Is that what you did?
Yes, bro.
Who did you
And
watch it with? Was it just like a
there was
random
just some
person?
random ass person in the theater
Why did
because
you decide to go watch it? You hadn't seen a trailer.
Cause bro, I shit you not. I was sitting at home, and I'm like, I saw like some of my movie peeps that I'm friends with on Twitter, like talking about this really absurd, kind of like what seemed at the time to turn into a cult like film.
Mm.
Kind of came out with no publicity, nothing. I was just reading this apparently did premiere at San Diego Comic Con though in July, and this released in September. Um, and I just heard people saying it's a crazy experience. Don't know anything about it, but go and see it. And
Mm.
so I just like looked up movie times, and it was playing in my theater. No one wanted to see it, but this was literally, I would say, about opening weekend.
Oh
So
damn.
September 9th. So I think I saw it around the 10th, the 11th, somewhere around there before like word got out on this. And
Mm.
dude, I would say if Endgame or Infinity War never existed, I would say this would probably be like my favorite theatrical film experience of all time, just because of how much of a batshit like crazy film this turns out to be in the most least suspecting way possible.
Yeah, I don't. I kind of do wish that I had seen this in a theater because, I mean, so the unfortunate thing is that I started watching this yesterday and I kind of got interrupted while I was watching it. And because I think I got about 30 minutes in, like right before she escapes the basement the first time, and like before she descends further into the tunnel, I got interrupted and I had to stop watching it. And that kind of like, you know, the steam kind of went away a little bit, but I was still managed to like get into it as it like continued because obviously like right after that things really start to pick up. But I would have really liked to watch this like uninterrupted, and I think that would have been a more interesting experience because there's a lot of details in this that I think are really interesting. Just the way that it's shot and the way some of the story elements come together that I feel like I was missing out a bit after I got interrupted that first time.
Yeah, the way this film is structured, I can see that happening because the film really never goes back to what it just shows you for about another 20 minutes. And
Yeah.
so you kind of forget what was going on until the movie catches back up, but all the information you were given is still relevant. Like nothing you just saw wasn't relevant to like what will come. And I think on a rewatch it makes this film that much better.
Mm.
And I knew this slightly after the film came out, like I was reading up on it, but this was slightly inspired by a nonfiction book that was called The Gift of Fear.
Yeah, yeah, I read about that too.
And one of the weird things, no, I don't want to say weird in like a negative context. I just found it interesting while watching this the first time back then that Zach Krieger, young white male, would make a film about misogyny, women's trust in their institutions, and like all these subsequent red flags that they never pick up in like your typical horror film, that
Mm.
he subverts your expectation on in the best way. And like I didn't expect it to come from Zach Krieger because I think that's what makes this opening 25 minutes work so well, is because it's shown in the perspective of her eye, but then as the film moves forward, you realize Bill Skarsgård isn't a bad guy. And then when she wakes up, she realizes she's actually in a really shady town, which he wasn't lying before, but you couldn't see because it was so dark out. So it made you think the whole time, like, do you believe him? Do you not? And so just a really fascinating approach to the storytelling of this film.
Yeah, I agree. I think the most interesting part about this movie is how it obscures and omits pieces of information until like right when it's important, or includes like because I kept going back a little bit to like what you were saying earlier. It was funny to me because when I was reading through like reviews and stuff for this film, I kept seeing people be like, "Oh, like there's this movie doesn't really like follow any real logic, but that's not important to the film, and that's why it gets away with it." And I was kind of thinking, they're like, that's not really true because
It's
there was
literally
some
the
like,
opposite.
yeah, because it kept bringing up things like, oh, why would she go along with this, and why would like why does the basement door lock from the outside? And I was like, well, there's a reason for that. Like, it doesn't outright say it, but it's very like implied that the reason why the door locks that way is because the original owner, that Frank guy, was like a serial rapist slash kidnapper, and like he literally it was like a fail safe, you know what I mean? Like he doesn't want it to lock from the inside so that they can't escape.
No, yeah. And I think that's what makes like their conversation once they do the laundry really well, when he like offers her wine and she's super hesitant because she doesn't know the dude, she doesn't know where he got it from. It could be
Yeah,
laced. And so he catches on slightly as it goes on that he needs to like quote unquote earn her trust by drinking the things or doing the things he's offering her without like proving that he can do it himself, if that makes sense.
yeah,
And they even have a full on conversation about how if the roles were reversed, he'd be outside finding another place. He wouldn't even be on the inside. So I think
yeah.
that comment's even crazier because there's a good 5 minute conversation about the gender dynamics and how female institutions never really trusted throughout most horror films.
And the other thing too is like it was weird when I first heard it. Some of the dialogue is a little weird at the beginning, but then you kind of realize why it's like that. And one of the other lines that I appreciated was him sort of explaining, like, not explaining, but he's like, he says like, "Oh, it's not up for discussion. Like, I'm gonna do these things for you." And I mean, he kind of goes into it of like, "Oh, maybe it's just the way that I was raised or whatever." And I kind of thought that that was interesting, like an interesting way of like setting up the more of like that red flag thing. Like, oh, he kind of has this, yeah, this upbringing that kind of makes him act this way, if that makes sense. And it adds on to these very subtle touches before we kind of get into like them starting to bond with each other, of like, oh, this is really weird, she could be in danger, he's acting very strange, all of this is very suspicious.
And then I think that's like what makes the midpoint switch in the film work that much better. And the second act for me is the person that gets introduced into into the story, Justin Long, he like absolutely the exact version of who she thought Keith was.
Yeah, and that's the thing that was another thing that I really enjoyed about this was the casting, because you have what's his name? Now I can't remember.
Bill
Bill
Skarsgård.
Skarsgård, yeah. You have Bill Skarsgård, who hot off of it, and you're expecting it, like all of that, and just the way that he acts, like super nervous and suspicious. All of that combined into this setup of like, oh, this something doesn't feel right. Just with like, the double booking, and him being like, oh, you should stay, and all that. And it's such an interesting subversion that he's actually just like a really cool guy. um and he's just, he actually cares about her safety. And then you have Justin Long, who is, playing up like the charm factor a little. Like, it starts with him just like, driving in his convertible singing a fucking random, song, and then immediately hits you with just like, oh, he's being accused of this thing, and then it just keeps building on to like, oh,
Just
more and
piling up.
more and more about like how not so good of a person he is. And I like that it doesn't outright say it, but it's
It's pretty
very
obvious.
it's yeah, it's very obvious that he, like, the allegation is true. And I really appreciated that about how it like reveals all those things.
Yeah, it wasn't in your face. Did
Yeah.
you know,
I also
like
like that
this?
we don't see any of that stuff happen, cuz sometimes
Yeah,
like,
films typically will like fall into that blunder of like, well, if we don't show it, it didn't happen. Well, it's just like, yeah, you don't
well,
need to
it's
show it
it's
because
worse in horror films. Like, we kind
yeah.
of talked a little bit about this in the Nosferatu episode, I think. And that reminds me a lot of that. And you have these two, white male directors, writer directors, tackling these kind of subjects. But I like how they use sort of those tropes and cliches that you see in, like, an older horror film, or a more modern, not so great horror film. And yeah, it uses them to have sort of a commentary, not on just like the film industry, but outside of that as well. And this one's a lot more heavy on it because AJ is a film, like, actor and producer. And what's her name? Tess.
Tess, she's
Tess is a
trying to be
film
a doc
researcher.
for a
Yeah,
documentarian
she's a
crew.
documentary researcher. And so there's a lot of times where they'll talk about like film stuff, and I thought that was really interesting tie-in to like the whole, themes around misogyny and sexual abuse and all that stuff.
Well, I think you bring up an interesting point just overall with that. I think, damn, I had a really good transition for that, and it just absolutely left my head. But I just think it's a really weird, or more so interesting comparison. Just when you look at Justin Long's character with AJ and how him and Frank are
Similar.
one in the same person. The only difference is it seems like Frank goes in on the temptation, and AJ, well, AJ goes in on the temptation, but not to the extent that like Frank does. Like, you know what I
they're,
mean?
they're
They
opposite ends
some
of the spectrum.
Yeah, they're opposite ends of the same spectrum. That's a good way
Yeah.
to put it. Because I just thought it was a really interesting scene when AJ finds him, and he just doesn't put any parallels to himself. After, like, I
Yeah.
know he was drunk and he made that phone call, but he clearly deep down knows that what he did was like wrong, and he
Yeah.
knows what she's accusing him of is correct. And I just find it very interesting that he calls him a monster without any real recollection on himself. And I just think that builds more to who he is as a character. And just a really good scene overall.
Yeah, I really, cuz it really like affected me when I got to that scene. And I wasn't at that point, I wasn't really sure where it was going with his story. And when it got to the point he was like calling him like a sick person or whatever, And I was just I the whole time I was just thinking like, dude, if you're one to talk, like you, yeah, you weren't as violent, and but it's still a bad thing that he did, and
Yeah, like
they're very much like in the same vein. You know what I mean? Oh, and yeah, I remember where I was going with that previous thing, because yeah, one of my biggest pet peeves, especially nowadays in movies, is what we're talking about, like that they feel compelled to show in like you know sometimes very graphic detail the abuse, and sometimes it just feels, or not sometimes, most of the time it feels very unnecessary. um and a lot of the time, like we even talked about it in our horror class, like a lot of the time we're seeing it through the point of view of the perpetrator, and it can feel very redundant and um exploitative. That's the word I'm looking for. And I've noticed it a lot more because obviously, coming out of like film school, we've had a lot of those discussions because we've seen it in some of like our own peers' work as well. But every year I feel like there's a movie that deals with this kind of stuff, and it's very controversial to include it. You know what I mean?
yeah, I just think that's where the great writing of Zach Cregger comes in with the way he sets it all up and how the
Yeah.
structure works with how he shows Frank in particular is that you just watch him go along his daily life and he gives you these really good and subtle hints of what he's doing. And then they kind of implement it more when AJ finds all the tapes and you look at all the names. Some of them aren't even names. They're just redhead, garden girl.
Yeah, they're
Like they're
features.
they're just features. And so if you think about his scene, it makes it all that much more disturbing when that's all he sees when he's lurking on these women. And if you
Yeah.
watch what he's doing in that scene, you know exactly what he does to them. And then you watch AJ's reaction.
Yeah, and see, that's what I really liked about this film and how it portrayed or depicted all of that stuff, is that because it's not necessary to the plot of the story, it's for us to see that. It's not necessary for because AJ obviously understands what it is because he's kind of done it himself, and we understand the disturbing nature of it without having to like visually see it, and because we get those hints and the implications and in how they behave, like just normally, like you were saying, like going about their normal routines, and it's very off-putting, and then we just naturally connect the dots, and it's just really really disturbing without showing it to us.
And I think that's what good horror does as well is it makes you more frightened in the thought rather than showing per se.
Hmm.
And I don't even think that even just means towards like sexual assault stuff in films,
Well,
but
even
I
like the
think
gore
that's
too.
what I was about to say, even in gore. And I think that's why like so many people when they watch like Saw films, gore is really like not even gross to them by the time they get to the seventh one because of how cartoonish it gets, you know?
Wait, yeah, well, see, that's what I liked about the original Saw, because I've never seen the other ones, and obviously you and I have had arguments about the
We're
whole
gonna get to
torture
them at
porn,
some point, bro.
the
We're
whole
gonna.
torture porn
I don't
discussion.
disagree. There's. I don't disagree with your point on it. It's only a specific bunch right in the middle, and
Yeah,
if we just talk about them, we can talk about the history,
but
like
I mean, what I mean to say is, like, the first one isn't really torture porn. It's a much more,
thoughtful
yeah, it's much
script.
more, not just the script, but just the way that it portrays the violence. Like, it doesn't need to go all out in, the gore effects and all the blood and the chopping off of limbs and stuff for us to, get the picture and the point. And so that's what it feels very similar here. And obviously there are some really gory moments, but it's again that thing of like, less is more.
I just found this review on IMDb. The title and the first sentence absolutely. I'll just read this whole review, just because it's funny. The title, they gave it a 4 out of 10, by the way. The title, did they change writers halfway through? Question mark. The first act is pretty good. Atmospheric, nuanced, interesting, decent acting, especially from Skarsgård. I did have to really suspend my disbelief a lot to allow the film to move forward, though. Double booked Airbnbs, no hotel rooms available. The main character had done no research on the area before arriving. Really? I'm not gonna break that down, but have you ever been in a city when like there's a Comic Con or like this is Detroit. It's not like it's not a big city at the same time. But as I digress, the second act started well and was enhanced because of the events of the first. It works because it sets the audience up in position where you have more knowledge than the newly introduced characters. It added tension. I was interested in what direction they would take the story. And then they just talk about how like they like the first two acts, but then like their structure kind of fucks with them and really doesn't make any sense. And I'm just like, oh my god, brother. And this is all on IMDb, people. Like, you really like. I think you're better off putting your effort into making a letterbox review like this.
I I understand what they mean, but at the same time, like I don't know. Sometimes, sometimes it bugs me when it feels like a movie is going out of its way to over explain something. But I think in this case, it the point is that we're clued in on all of the red flags that she's sort of having to she's conflicted about. You know what I mean? And
Yeah, like
that's the
she
point. That's
chooses.
the point. And yeah, we're never really told for a fact that what he said was true, but it's kind of it's more implied because we realize halfway through that he wasn't a bad person, at least from what we could tell. But at the beginning of the movie, I just assumed in my head I was like, oh, that's a little convenient, but I didn't think of it as like, oh, that's just the movie being bad. I just was like, oh, this is him still trying to get her to stay. And I mean, she does look, she calls someone or one of the hotels and is like, hey, do you have room? And they're like, oh, no, we don't. So I
She even
think there's,
offers to leave without getting a hotel room.
yeah. So I feel like it feels more of a nitpick because to me it doesn't feel like that's so big of like a plot hole or a convenient plot device. You know what I mean?
No, yeah, I absolutely agree. Because I don't know, I feel like in the modern technology world, like overbooking, like first of all, it wasn't on both on Airbnb. They described that they overbooked using two different apps.
Yeah,
So
and see
I
that didn't bug me either because I'm like that sounds like a stupid thing
something
that
would
would
happen.
happen.
Yeah, right.
And
Like,
obviously I've seen trailers for rom-coms that have a similar premise.
bro, rom coms are the biggest sins of this. Like, I'm
Yeah.
sorry.
But I mean it's just, it's they're rom-coms and horror are another, they're extremes of the same spectrum as well.
Yeah, I agree. I absolutely agree. I just got to know what were your expectations of this film going into it? Just because I want to know what you were thinking of before the film like reveals what it's about with like the whole mother plot line,
Mm,
and
the meat of the
AJ.
story.
Yeah, the real meat of the story halfway through.
Um, I mean, so like I said before, I had seen the trailer, and I don't remember if I said this on or off the podcast, but I had heard about it, and I was never too interested in checking it out. Like I'd heard good things about it, but from what I saw in the trailer, I was just like, this kind of seems like your average, low budget um horror film, and not low budget, and like it's a B movie or
The
anything.
trashy way, yeah.
Yeah, but I was just like, I don't really think this is because the setup of it is very focused on like the dynamic of like these two regular people, and that didn't really interest me. Like I've said before, I'm more of like a supernatural horror kind of that's more my style. and gothic horror and that kind of stuff too. Um, and so yeah, I don't know. The I think the trailer could have done more. Obviously, like I don't mean to say like spoil a lot of the plot. Yeah, a lot of the plot elements, but I just kind of felt like it could have been better at marketing the atmosphere and aesthetic of the film, if that makes sense. Because that's more of what I respond to from trailers when I watch for like horror films. Like, not like the general setup is appreciated, but I kind of prefer more of is this like a jump scare kind of movie? Is this like more artsy, elevated horror esque type stuff? You know what I mean? And I didn't
Yeah.
really get that from the trailer. But when I started watching it, I was interested. I was like, oh, this is the way that Skarsgård's character, fuck, what's his name now? I can't remember. Keith. I should know that. That's my dad's name. Keith. Like the way that he acts around her, like the way, like all of that was really interesting. Um, and the only thing I would say about that is that some of the dialogue is a little weird and not just in the natural sort of awkwardness of the scene, but
I think it's how like Skarsgård plays it. I
it's
think
both of them. Like
I think the
it's
thing
not
is
just
he
one or the
plays it
other.
kind of sinister for some reason. He's
Yeah, a little bit, but which sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, and same with her. But the other thing too is the jump, like the jump from her being suspicious of him to them starting to like enjoy each other's company was a little bit abrupt to me. But it wasn't enough to make me want to stop watching. And obviously, getting into the meat of the story, I was like, what the fuck? Because I texted you right after I saw him get his head crushed, and I was like, well, Pennywise didn't last very long.
but this
But
big old naked titted women.
it's such one. It's a good jump scare, and it's such an unexpected twist that there's something else down there, and that he like immediately dies. That once it skips over like POVs, I was like fuck,
It
and
makes you want
I
more.
really wanted to keep watching.
But it makes it so much better once AJ goes down there because it's the exact opposite of their story. He goes down there looking at it as an investment opportunity in terms of making the property worth more money because he needs it. And the dude does not think once about how creepy being down there is. And so the whole time you're just kind of waiting like, oh my god, bro, is he just gonna like run into this naked woman that's running around there? Like what?
Yeah, that was the thing that I really liked as well, because one, it's really funny for no reason. Like
It plays it super casual.
yeah, it
Like you know
does.
what's there, and
And
that's
but
the
the whole time we're like, oh fuck, this dude is like gonna get himself killed. And but also like building on the same themes with him. I really I both love and hate the scene where he goes to the bar, um
oh, I
because
think it's a really great scene. You know
no,
that's
yeah,
that
it's
Cregger that he's talking to, right?
yeah.
Cool. Okay, I just want to make
I
sure.
really love, I think it's a good scene, but it's so
Hard. It's
uncomfortable.
yeah. It's so hard to
It's
listen
hard to get
to.
through this, just the way that he
Is trying to
um
like explain himself around it, like he
yeah,
and you're just like, bro, you're doing an awful job. And like, the friend is at least trying to give him the benefit of the doubt, but he's
yeah.
still like asking him and grilling him. And you just know the whole time you're just like, okay, so you did do this is the scene that changes your opinion 100% on who AJ is.
Yeah, and then right after that, he makes that drunken phone call, which
Yeah,
is
and then that
also another great like part. Like going from the scene of him essentially confessing, but in a really fucked up way of like, oh, but yeah, like it wasn't really that. You know what I mean? Like he's trying to play it off, which is just gross. And then you go into him like I do genuinely kind of believe that he was sorry, but not for the right reason,
Yeah.
which makes it worse.
I, this film just does really interesting dual side comparisons between the first 25 minutes and like the next 25 30 after that, with the way that like Keith interacts with women. And like, even though like AJ's not directly next to the woman that is accusing him, he's
Yeah,
still having a conversation about how he made her uncomfortable, which is what Keith does, just in a much different way, a much more polite, and in a much different context, because it's before the fact of anything ever happening. So I think the way it's all set up is just super well done. And that's why I didn't like the ending at first with the way it all unfolded when I first saw this in the theater. But the
mm,
more I've sat on it and I've seen it like another time or so after the first theater experience, I really like how Zach Cregger just fully just commits to AJ being the world's biggest piece of shit by like tricking you into thinking that maybe this experience
would
does
change
change him
him.
for the better. But then he does something like
Super fucked up.
just super fucked up by like just killing her to save himself essentially. And I mean, it fucking doesn't work for him, but it's just like, I commend Zach because he could have easily done what I think many filmmakers would have done, and
Yeah,
like not
given
intentionally
him a
make,
redemption.
yeah, like I don't want to say like the R word apologist almost,
Mm,
but like, you know what I mean? You know what I'm trying to get
yeah,
at? Like,
yeah,
I'm glad that Zach Cregger said no, AJ's a piece of shit. And I'm really glad he did that with it being Justin Long, because I feel
yeah.
like Justin Long, like more recently, he's played bad guys in horror films. I don't know if you've heard of that film Silent Knife, Deadly Knife.
No, I
It's on
haven't.
Shutter, but he plays like a ghost face killer in that film. And
Hmm.
so I know him from the fucking Jeepers Creepers film, bro. So seeing him play like a really big piece of shit was such a interesting like dynamic for an actor that I known for playing that role in like Jeepers Creepers, the kind of gullible, likable, cool but nerdy brother
Yeah,
type figure. You know what I
yeah,
mean?
yeah. Oh well, I've never seen Jeepers Creepers, but I've seen him in other movies where he's like he does play him very likable, but at the same time, the movie is constantly telling you like
He's a piece of
this
shit.
dude is an asshole, and it gives him the opportunity to realize that, and he kind of does, but then you quickly realize that it's just because he's pretending that he's not that kind of person. And I really like the scene before he does like that complete like flip of like, oh, I have to sacrifice you to save myself, where he's having that moment of like, oh, maybe I'm just a good person that did a bad thing, or I'm a bad person just in general. And that was an interesting sort of like uh inner conversation that he was having out loud, and to immediately go into that bad thing that he does, and it's just like, bruh, what the fuck? Like, how
And
can you be this horrible of a person?
and not really realize it too.
Yeah, that's the worst thing. And that's so that's the worst thing about him as a character, but
He's
I love
oblivious
it.
to it all.
Yeah, I love it because it in the end the monster or the mother ends up being more human than he is.
Mm-hmm.
And like you can see the look on the both of their faces, the mother and Tess, that I don't know, it really made me think about it, and I just really appreciated that.
Yeah, and I love when a film makes the traditional monster the sympathetic, like I'm trying to think of the word, like someone who had to be like the consequences of their actions, unfortunately,
Yeah,
through the mother. And I remember watching the first time, I did chuckle a little bit watching Mother jump off the edge, because just the way it's framed and shot's a little funny.
yeah, the effect is a little wonky.
That's what I'm saying. Like the way it all like comes together is what I laughed at more so than the meaning, because I think it's a really good moment because it just explains that the mother is just not. It's really just a mother, and
Yeah.
the mother's never known what the feeling of that is outside of the TV screen. And all they know is to cherish and nurture through like sucking on their tit, whether it might be the most gross fucking scene I've ever seen in my life. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
there's all these deeper meanings to who the villains are, and even though the mother is physically grotesque, AJ and Frank are 10, 20, 30, 50,000 times more disgusting than the mother like ever could be. And I think that's like the staple of a good film, you
Well, I
know?
think it's also interesting too that um Tess is the only one who like realizes like cuz she says directly to AJ when he first falls into that like pit or whatever, like
Shut up.
she
Like,
just wants you to be her baby.
yeah, she just wants to care for you,
Yeah, and
no matter how
and
fucked up it seems right
and
here.
that's the reason why she kills Keith, because he just starts freaking out.
Exactly. And
And,
that's why she jumps off, is to jump and protect Tess.
yeah, and so
But
I like that, like, the only female character essentially in this movie is the only one that figures out sort of what the deal is, and everyone else just can't get over how, scary she is and how just monstrous she appears to be, you know what I mean?
no, yeah, I absolutely agree. It's so good because on top of like all these really great story beats, I think the way this film is shot, like I think Zach Cregger like takes the way he filmed this movie up like two or three notches in weapons.
Mm.
But I really think some of the way he shoots this film is really great. Like a lot
Well,
of the stuff downstairs in the basement when like AJ's trying to escape and like you hear mother like in the I'm just gonna call it the catacombs at this point because just so many good moments down in the catacombs.
going off of that, I was reading a little bit into this, and I don't know remember if it was the director or like someone who reviewed it who compared it to like the everything in like the normal area of the house is very like Fincher-esque, in the way it's shot, and then everything below is more like Sam Raimi. And
Yeah.
I really liked that way of putting it because it does make total sense. I mean, Sam Raimi's style is much more difficult to like replicate. Um,
I think he puts his own spin on it though really
yeah,
well.
yeah,
He adds space to a very claustrophobic area, which
yeah,
I
and
think is really
it also
interesting.
helps that the majority of it is very underlit, and I don't mean that in a bad way. Like, there's just so much that's obscured by shadow, and there's only ever one source of light, and it's always like just a
A
flashlight.
phone.
And so it makes it much more scary because, we can't see what's happening and neither can the characters either. And so it just adds to the very creepy nature of just this fucking underground tunnel.
I just find it funny that you mentioned that quote before because every time I think of or I watch this film, I think of Frank's story as very Fincher esque, and you saying that just like yeah, that makes total fucking sense because that's literally what that entire like his part of the story is about, and like just the way it's filmed, the aspect
Yeah.
ratio, like it all like bro, I that's what I love about it. I think Zach Cregger is able to hone so many different ideas and visions, not just thematically through the script, but visually through the camera, that it just enhances this film so much.
Yeah, it really does. I also love that they're like the colors really pop in that like flashback sequence, and just compared to the rest of it, like the rest of it is very dark and dim. And then just once we're back in, like, I don't remember if it was like the 60s or something. um but yeah, it's super colorful, which makes it equally more off-putting, like the behavior that Frank exhibits. Just that entire scene is just so very, very chilling.
Yeah, because like the whole scene, you're just like, okay, he's getting baby supplies for a baby, but then that whole part of the film never resolves that. So you're just sitting here like, why did he just get all this baby stuff? He didn't use any of it to like go and kidnap the woman. He just surveyed her house. So what's it for? And then when they come back to that later, it just, oh, dude, the way
Well,
it's all laid out,
it's resolved when he opens the door to the basement and you hear, the
the woman
screams,
screaming.
and then
Yeah.
you're like, oh, and then you remember like, oh shit, that's right, there was like a bed in there downstairs and
And
everything.
the TV had
Yeah, the baby
the
stuff.
baby video going on, and you're
Yeah,
like, okay, motherhood, like you're getting it, but you're like, what? But that when he opens and then closes the door, that is when it's all firmly cemented, and it's
yeah.
really
Without
horrifying.
it being just like in your face either.
And it's easily the darkest moment of the film too, with it being
Yeah,
the brightest, and that's
yeah.
also horrifying. Like
Because there's nothing like violent, or there's nothing like explicitly violent in that entire sequence compared to like the rest of the movie. But then that one just manages to be the most disgusting to the viewer.
it uses its like disgusting nature of the film to good use.
Yeah, it really
It
does.
uses it to shock value in all the right ways. Like to go
Yeah.
back to what you were saying before about how it doesn't use the shock value through what AJ and Frank do in the story, but through like the mother protecting Tess through bashing in Keith's head or ripping open AJ's head. Like those are more meaningful, shocking moments because they have some weight to them rather
Yeah.
than, oh, this is just fucked up because no one should be going through this, you
Yeah.
know? And it's fucked up
Yeah.
just because, oh my God, dude, that's crazy, but this person deserves it. Like,
Yeah.
and then you feel bad when. I, I don't even want to say that. I'm really conflicted because when Tess pulls the trigger on the mother, I feel bad, but then you think like, should I? Is
It
Zach
feels more
Cregger telling you?
merciful.
That's what I was thinking. Is Zach Cregger just saying that this is just more merciful? And I agree. Like just a lot of deeper contextual stuff going on with this film that I
Hmm.
think a lot of people like, even though it's highly sought after, don't catch on to because I don't know if I said this to you or someone else, but I think the way people are speaking and talking about weapons is the way I felt towards Barbarian
Mm.
between coming out of nowhere, really different contextual film, but it's also saying a lot. I
Yeah.
I mean, this might be a spoiler for my thoughts, but I don't think Weapons digs as deep into the themes of the story and what it's trying to talk as well as Barbarian does,
Mm.
which is why I think this film is better. But like, dude, I just love this movie, and I'm glad we finally got to talk about it. And I'm like, me whenever I get you to watch horror, it's just always a good day for me.
Well, I this one's definitely because our conversation about the slashers was more polarizing, I would say, than this one has been. I feel like I've had much more good things to say about this, and I don't know. I just think all of the little details that went into it makes it such an interesting and ultimately satisfying viewing experience. Because I also really like the ending of the movie because it forces you to be like, do you want the monster to die because ultimately it's a victim as well, but at the same time you're like, well, but
It would die.
you don't
Mother would
want
die
Tess
anyway.
you don't want Tess to have to go through that again, and you don't want anyone to go through it, and so it's just at you still feel like she made the right decision to survive herself. um but yeah, I don't know. I could go on about
I
that
also thought it
ending.
was interesting that they never touched on Frank's and the mother's relationship. No interaction, nothing. I'm not
I
saying
think
it needed
the
to happen. I just
Yeah,
know a lot of other films would have done that.
I think it's interesting that the only context we're given is when AJ stumbles across his room and he sees the mother, like, in kind of in the background, and she just like slowly backs away, like she doesn't want to go near it.
Intrude.
And so the only thing, the way I felt about it was she's still kind of traumatized by Frank,
Yeah.
and I don't really know how to feel about him killing himself, to be
Well,
honest.
I like it because I felt that way the first time too because it felt kind of not
Random.
random, not yeah, random. But the more I thought about it, the more I liked it because right off the bat, once AJ gets in the room, Frank is already trying to reach for something. And so it took me a few times to think about, but he's trying to reach for the gun the whole time because
Yeah.
AJ's gonna find out what he did, so he knows he's fucked. So I just take it as
Mm.
he's just like taking himself out before AJ can ever go and do something because he
Mm.
doesn't view the mother as a monster as like AJ or Tess does. You know, like
Okay.
I just don't think he views the mother as something that's gonna kill him or like imprison him like a cop would do, right?
Mm. You know, I'm see. Yeah, this is a reason why I'm glad we had this conversation, because now that makes more sense.
It
Because
adds a little bit, yeah.
going off of the whole thing about Frank and AJ being very similar, I like that because it's, you know, AJ also is more concerned about his reputation.
Bro, the first thing he says is, "My life is over."
Yeah, and so to me, that's also similar to why Frank kills himself.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I
That,
actually I like that.
no,
That
bro, that's what I'm
now it
saying.
makes more sense.
That's why I said I thought it was kind of weird at first too, but the more I like, it seems something that feels kind of obvious now that I feel like we're talking about it.
Yeah,
But like, it's something where it's just like, wait a second, and I
completely
think
went
that's
over my
why I
head.
really like this film because I've watched
Yeah,
it three or four times now, and I still feel like this giddy talking about it and like figuring out simple things like that. Like, it's so fucked up that
yeah,
Frank is just ready to shoot himself once AJ finds him, and then it just gets deeper between the similarities between the two.
yeah. That's damn. Yeah, I probably never would have picked up on that, but that's actually really cool. Like
Right,
it's a cool
bro?
detail, because it is random in just the fact of like, damn, that this Zach Cregger thought of that and was just like, I'm just gonna put this in here, and it's gonna, yeah, I don't know, I really like that.
Dude, I know that there's so many of those moments in here that just so good. I feel like we just keep gassing it up so much. Um,
Yeah, I don't that yeah I
do we want to get into final rankings and like
yeah,
some
yeah.
summary? All right, I'll let you go first, boss.
Um, yeah, I mean, as I said before, I gave it a 4 out of 5 stars. It's really good. I there's some things that I kind of talked about that I take a little issue with. Just the way that it some of the dialogue comes off at the start, but once you really get past the 25-minute mark, you realize why some of it's like that, and it starts to make more sense. And it's a roller coaster of a ride, and I mean that in not the typical way of just like, oh, it's just nonstop. Yeah, you know what I mean. It's just it's every once in a while, I'll just throw a curveball, and for some reason it works. And that's the greatest thing about this movie.
Yeah, no, I absolutely agree. I gave this a 4.5 out of 5. I didn't leave like a funny review or anything, just because like you were saying, I think this movie is brilliant. It There's so many curveballs, and I like the structure of the film because I think it lets you breathe at the proper moments to let
Mm,
you envelop into the rest of the story before, like, what is it? It cuts right as you see Mother into AJ's story, and then once AJ sees her, it cuts again right into Frank's story. So you're never given like the full gist of the mother, just this really freakish creature. And then from Frank's story on, it's just this slow, torturous unfolding that you really wish you didn't know. But
yeah.
at the same time, that's what makes it such a great film. And I said this when Weapons was coming out, and I'm going to say this again. Zach Cregger, I'm just so fucking excited for what this man is going to do for horror, because I think he's going to be the future of horror. He's doing
Mm,
a Resident Evil film, my guy. He's doing that. Oh, I don't want to talk about that DC film.
so okay, so real quick, I just want to interject real quick. I
No,
I kind of agree with what you're saying, but I'm not so sure that the direct moving in the direction of like IP type stuff is the right way to go.
no, I definitely don't disagree. But at the same time, I think he's also making another. He's writing his own horror film too.
Yeah, I
So
yeah.
I think it's fine in the context of one. I appreciate that he's doing Resident Evil as a Resident Evil fan, because I think the biggest problem with the franchise is people have just been trying to replicate the video games in the worst way possible. Like it makes no sense. They'll say they're not trying to, but then they try to add all these characters in these same locations, and it's just not good. And from what he says, like talking about it, it seems like he's not paying attention to the games, and he's just trying to make his own film, which can go one of two ways, right? But after watching this and Weapons, it's clear he has a vision and he has a theme that he wants to tell. Um,
Yeah.
I'll leave it at that, but I'm excited for what he has in the future. I can't wait for you to see Weapons, because,
I'm excited, man. I really want to go see it now.
yeah, it's about 40 minutes longer, too, than this. It's 2 hours and 20 minutes. It's a long film,
Was this one only like
an hour 40.
oh damn.
Yeah, this one breezes
Interesting.
by, too.
Huh. I mean that's how invested in the movie I was. I wasn't even looking at the fucking runtime.
Nope, it just goes by and you're just there for the ride.
Yeah.
All right,
Well,
Leo, what are we watching next week?
all right. Next week, we've taken a little time to just do one film at a time, but next week we're getting back back into our usual programming. So I'm really excited about this one. So, Godzilla, sorry, Shin Godzilla is being re-released in 4K. I don't know if you've ever seen that one, but it's a really good movie. And so we're gonna take a little time to talk about three Godzilla movies. We're not gonna talk about any of the American ones because that deserves its own episode. And obviously, they're gonna keep making more of the MonsterVerse movies, so we'll have the opportunity to talk about those. But I primarily wanted to focus on the Japanese ones. So we're kind of gonna do one from each era, but not really because there's like four of them. But we're gonna talk about Mechagodzilla or Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla. We're gonna talk about I think it's yeah Godzilla versus Biolante, and then Godzilla minus one, the most recent one.
Let's go.
So stay tuned for that.
All right, guys, let us know down below what you thought about Barbarian and Zach Cregger as a whole. Without ado, we'll see you guys on the next one. Peace.